Namaste. I'm Reverend Wendy Craig-Purcell here at the Unity Center in beautiful San Diego. Thank you so much for subscribing to this channel. Please make sure that you like the video you've just watched and consider making a contribution on our app or on our website. It's really easy to do, and thank you in advance for that support. It does make a difference. To me, that song it represents this idea of wild imagination, right? Getting outside our usual way of thinking about ourselves and our life and our possibilities and really letting ourselves be creative. It's one of the things, perhaps one of the most important things that sets us apart in all sentient beings is this ability to create. Can you bring me down a little bit? I feel a little loud. This ability to create, this ability to imagine, this ability to see what our life is now and then not be limited by that, to be able to be expansive and to stand for and think about and hold and then act upon something different. And I think in Eric's book, The Creative Life, as he takes this metaphysical look at the creation story in Genesis, and he reminds us that it is not a historical story. This being called God did not create everything that exists in 7 days. In Unity, we do not look at the Bible as the inerrant word of God, but we don't throw it out either. We recognize that the Bible needs to be looked at with wisdom, that the Bible needs to be looked at mystically and metaphysically, and that it also has to be looked at with some understanding of how it just came to be. Many of us think it started with Genesis and ended with Revelation, and it's this chronological thing, and it is not. But I don't have time to give you a Bible lesson today. I've done that before. And so in this story of creation are keys to our process of creating in our own lives. We have the let there be light, insight, right? Let there be illumination and understanding in our lives as a spark of creativity begins. Let there be light. And we've got to keep looking, right, and keep imagining what is possible. As we move into this third day of creation, we are looking at this idea of imagination. And on the third day, we're told that God said, let the waters under the heavens be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. Now, just think about the imagery of that for a moment. Let the waters under the heaven, remember, last week we talked about let there be a firmament, and let the firmament be called the heavens, that the ancients believed that the sky was this ceiling, really, a dome. And here on the third day, get this imagery for a moment. Let the waters under the heavens, under this dome, which mystically refers to it as expansion, but let the waters of the heavens be gathered together in one place, and let the dry land appear. Can you get the sense of something coming up out of what seems like nothingness, if you will? Something coming up out of what seems like nothingness. Is that not a bit of a way of looking at imagination, right? Imagination is the ability to perceive, the ability to think beyond what currently exists. In his chapter on let the waters of the heavens be gathered together and let the dry land appear, as Eric writes about this idea, this power of imagination, he says, pause for a moment and think about this. He says, religion is often approached as a horizontal study. He says, religion is often approached as a horizontal study. And then he goes on to say a little bit more about that, saying that religion is often about the vast arc of time, of people and prophets and places and events. He says, but our approach is not a horizontal approach. Ours is a vertical approach. And he challenges us to think about it in terms of the spark of intuition. He often, in all of his writings, actually talks about our minds being an inlet and an outlet of the one mind, the God mind, the infinite mind, the universal mind, whatever it is that we want to call that vastness, that force and power for good that is beyond us. He says we are an inlet and an outlet of that. The idea of inspiration, the idea of intuition, not a going out first, but a coming in first. He says, when dealing with the creative process, we're talking about the working of the mind in a vertical or intuitive way, more like the working of a fountain. That you and I are thinking creatures. We are creating creatures. We have created individually the lives that we are living in right now. I've created by my choices, by my patterns, by my habits, by my knowledge, my lack of knowledge, I have created the structure and the texture of my life. And the same is true of you. You have done that as well. Every one of us really is a creative genius. Some of us are creating very deliberately and very consciously. That's what New Thought and our teaching is all about. And some of us have gotten kind of lazy in our thinking, or maybe never really took up the concept that we are meant, or we have the capacity to think deliberately, We are creative beings, and we can deliberately imagine the kind of life experience we want for ourselves and for others. It's not a matter of getting something from the outside of us and putting it in. It's a matter of getting out of our own way and releasing the power and the potential that's already within us. That often means that we need to do some healing work. It often means that we need to learn a few things. We need to understand how principle works. Psychology has said for a very long time now that we use less than half of our capacities, less than half of our mental and creative capacities. Imagine what that means for each of us. If that is at all true, if the best of us are using less than half, what would it be like if we could increase that even a bit? It would be powerful, wouldn't it? And the point is that we can. And it's about awakening the process within us. It's about doing the inner work that is ours to do, to get ourselves out of the way, to show up with authenticity, to not be so afraid, to step out into the unknown, to do or to try something different. When we read up the third day, let the waters be gathered together and the dry land appear. That imagery really struck me over the last few days as I was looking over my notes again. This image of let the waters be gathered together and the dry land appear. The imagery that I got is it's like all of these swirling thoughts in our minds, the craziness that you spoke of, Daniel, about you don't want to be in my mind, right? All of these thoughts in our minds, these concepts in our minds swirling around, but eventually, through deliberate action, we begin to coalesce them. We begin to bring them into a form. The dry land appears, the possibility appears, the concept of what we want, whether it is in business or in our communities or in our families, suddenly it's as if a light bulb goes off, right? And we go, oh, that's what it could be. I can pull together what seem to be these random thoughts and ideas, and I can see how they're starting to come together, how they're starting to help me be able to get a grasp on a new possibility for my life. This power of imaging. He writes, the dry land is a mental image of formed thoughts, the ability to see what can be as opposed to what is. I think, we stand here on the weekend of the weekend that we honor Martin Luther King Jr., right? And I think about the power of his spoken word in Washington, D.C., when before thousands upon thousands of people, he painted an image for us of his dream, right? Of his dream, thoughts that had been swirling in his mind, thoughts that had been swirling in the minds of all of those who were fighting for civil rights at that time. Swirling and eventually coalescing in a concrete image, and then breathing so much life and passion and energy into that image, and then doing the hard work of working toward bringing that forth. It is the coalescing of the waters and allowing the dry land, allowing what had not existed before to come into form. Butterworth writes, unfortunately, the tendency to oversimplify and even debase this process as holding images is all too common. We think, I want a new car. We form the image of the car we want and paste the picture on the bathroom mirror where we will see it frequently. He says this is a problem. When you try to put something that is outside in, instead of releasing that which is inside out, it is metaphysical gimmickry, a corruption of a beautiful process. That's a pretty bold statement for such an influential New Thought minister and leader to have said at the time. And what he was challenging us to do was to realize that it's not a process from the outside in, but from the inside out. That it's not about seeing the image, but seeing from the image. Not about seeing the image, but seeing from the image, as if the image is resonating and emanating is the right word, from within us. So we're not looking at it as something separate from us, but we're seeing it from within ourselves. He cites a fascinating example of a study that had been done by two psychologists who were working in a veterans hospital. And they were working with 45 patients there who had some mental health issues. And they wanted to see if they could help these mental health patients build a better life by stepping into, to use words like Eric would use, seeing from the image of wholeness. Not just seeing wholeness, but seeing from the image of wholeness and well-being. And so the psychologists posed a series of questions to these 45 vets, and they told them to answer the questions as they imagined a well-adjusted person would answer them. Not the way they would answer them for themselves, but to answer them the way they would imagine a well-adjusted person would have answered them. And what the study revealed were the answers were so very different and very positive. And it helped to put them on a trajectory of their own healing process because they were beginning to see from the image of wholeness. Does that make sense? It's a subtle difference, but it's a really, really significant and powerful difference. To see not just the image, but to see from the image. He suggests that one of the greatest misuses of our power of imagination is worry. Think about it. Think about it. One of the most serious misuses of our power of imagination, he suggests, is worry. He says it is warping of prayer. That worrying is the warping of prayer. I think he was onto something there, right? People can worry with great vividness. Have you ever heard somebody tell you about what they're worried about? Right? And have you ever been on the receiving end of a really clear and vivid picture of what that person has got going on in their mind, right? And to the extent that we believe, and I certainly do, that thought is formative. And when we hold onto thoughts and beliefs, dominant thoughts and beliefs, over a period of time, they become hardwired in our very fabric of being. And we find ourselves then vibrating at the level of whatever that image and that idea and that belief is. And much like a tuning fork, we're going to attract to us that which is vibrating at a similar level. And so this idea of the warping of prayer, this idea that we must not use our power, and it's a strong power of imagination in this way, is significant. And when we catch ourselves doing that, what do? We have to supplant it with another picture, with another idea, right? If I say, don't picture a pink elephant with purple polka dots. What do you have to do to not picture a pink elephant with purple polka dots? You can talk to me, it's okay. What do you have to do? You have to think of something else, right? You have to think of something else. It's as simple and as slippery as that, right? As simple and as slippery as that. Eric writes, it's shocking how many people are bogged down with an I can't consciousness and who have no hope written all over their faces. No philosophy in the world can bring success to the person who is forever indulging his or her emotions with visions of inadequacy and limitation. What would it be like if right alongside our quiet mindfulness meditation practices, we included a period of time every day, maybe in the middle of the day, maybe at the end of the day, I don't know, to let our imagination run wild with possibility, to be forward-thinking, forward-imaging. What is it that you would be holding in your mind? What is it that you would be wanting? Being able to see it and then see from it is key to bringing it about. The industrialist Henry Kaiser said, it's just as easy to see yourself successful as it is to see yourself as a failure, and far more interesting. You and I get to choose. We really do. But it's not a one-time choice. It's a again and again and again choice. We get to choose what we're going to imagine and where we're going to put forth our energy. We get to bring the waters together and let the dry land, the possibility, the image, the idea emerge from that. There was a little boy who was out at a public swimming pool and he was fishing. He had a little fishing rod and was fishing in the pool. An adult asked him, what are you doing? What are you fishing for? He said, I'm fishing for sharks. And the adult said, well, there are no sharks in that pool. And the little boy looked at him and said, no, there aren't any sharks in that pool either. There aren't any fish in that pool, so I might as well fish for what it is I want to fish for. I might as well fish for what it is I want to fish for, right? Don't ever let somebody steal your imagination. Don't ever let a naysayer steal what you're hoping for yourself, for your family, for your world. We all know the studies that have shown the power of our minds to visualize, that the nervous system really can't tell the difference between an actual experience and a vividly imagined and felt. A vividly imagined and felt experience. You know this, right? Years ago at the University of Chicago, there was an experiment, a mind experiment, a visioning experiment held on this very subject. The researchers gathered together basketball players, and they divided them into 3 groups. The purpose of the division and the purpose of the study was to see how beneficial imaginary practice was compared to actual practice, compared to no practice whatsoever. And so these basketball students were divided into 3 groups. Before they were divided, they were tested, and each was given a score in terms of their ability to shoot hoops. And then in those 3 groups, one group was told, come back to the court every day for 30 days together and practice shooting hoops for 1 hour. The second group was told, don't go to the courts, but visualize, image in your mind and feel it in your body every day for 30 days, shooting hoops. And the third group was told, don't do any of that. Just live your life, not on the court, don't imagine. And then after the 30 days, they were brought back. Do you know what the results were? The group that had practiced every day on the court, physical practice, improved 24%. You would expect that there would be some improvement, right? 24%. The group that didn't practice at all, not in their minds and not on the court, had no improvement whatsoever. But do you know how much the group that practiced in their mind, not on the court, but for an hour in their mind, visualized it, imaged it, and felt it? They improved 23%. 23%. The ones that were actually on the court improved 24%. I would say that's pretty darn good. I would say you and I have at our very fingertips, at the very ends of our neurons in our brain, the ability to fundamentally change the quality of our lives to whatever extent we really want to. In science, it's called ex nihilo, out of nothing. The idea that out of nothing something can come forth. In Genesis, metaphysically, it's the gathering of the waters and letting the dry land emerge. And so as I start to wrap this up, I really want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to ask yourself, how is it that you are using your power of imagination now? Just catch yourself. Just notice. Just set the intention right now before you leave that for this week, you're just going to pay attention to how you're using your mind. What are you picturing? And just be aware of it. And then I'd like to ask you to do one more thing. And that is, as you're just paying attention to how you're using your mind throughout the day for this next week, that you set aside 5 minutes every single day, just 5 minutes every single day, to close your eyes, to sit quietly, and to use your mind and your mental capacities deliberately to image something you want to be experiencing and drawing into your life. I hope some of you will, actually, I hope all of you will try that. To spend 5 minutes every day, the same thing you're imaging, can't popcorn around with this, but the same thing, to visualize it, to see it as best you can, to see from it, to feel it in your body, to bring as many of your senses into the experience as possible, and notice how you feel after that exercise. Notice if ideas start popping into your head. Notice if doors start to maybe open. Notice if you have some insights or some opportunities that start to come your way. But pay attention. If it is true, and I think that it is, that every single one of us is using much less of our capacity than we have, then if we want this new year to be brighter and better and not a repeat of last year, then we need to amp up our practice a bit. And it doesn't have to be tremendously different. What matters most is whatever we choose to introduce as a new idea and a new practice, that we do it consistently. That we do it consistently. That's where the real change happens. Namaste.